Let's have a quick look at getting started with Python. I'm going to recreate part of this Hello User program, one that just has some simple testing the user details with loops and a switch statement and some different functions and procedures here so that we can see a little bit about how to create some of these. Now, obviously our first program should be Hello World. Rather than searching for this, I'm going to just show you the code for this. It is just a case of calling the print procedure, and inside this we can pass our text. And that's it. If I save that, there's my Hello World program. I can run that using Python 3 and then the name of the file. The .py extension indicates it's Python, but remember it's just any text file, as long as it's a text file. So Hello World gets printed out. Now that we've done that, let's have a go at using SplashKit and creating these functions and procedures and getting some of that working. To start off with, we're going to need to include the SplashKit library. We could look this up, but because the syntax itself is a little tricky to find, I'll provide that for you. You could just search for how to include a library. We will do from SplashKit import star. We could then use WriteLine to output that Hello World message. We would then run this using skm, Python 3, and Hello World. And that will locate the Python library and execute it for us, or locate the SplashKit library and execute it for us. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've got this working. We have access to all of those functions and procedures out of SplashKit. So the same functions and procedures we were exploring in C++. So the idea of this is it helps us bridge the two different languages because we have the same library. If we were learning Python without that, we would need to just learn all of the new Python library as well. And it would be a case of when we've got started with SplashKit, we should then start exploring what the Python library gives us as well. But for the moment, let's use SplashKit. Alright, so down the bottom here, one of the first things that we're going to need to do is being able to output this menu and read in an integer. Why don't we just start with reading in the user's name? We could start with this part of the code here, and that will help us create read string when we get there. In this case, Python, we don't need to actually declare variables, but we know how to use write. That was just the standard write command we had in SplashKit, so I can call write. A string is still using double quotes here, so I can say, what is your name? There we go. So it's not hugely different, except the spelling. What is your name? Isn't hugely different to what we have here. Then we need to read line in order to read in the string. Now I can do that using SplashKit's read line, and we should get that string working. So, and why don't we just output our hello message as well. So we can do write line hello plus name. Cool. Hello Andrew. So we can see here the code for this isn't hugely dissimilar from the code we have over here. Let's have a look now at how we can find out a little bit more about the Python language in order to put that into a procedure, this test user details procedure. For that, we'll need to have a look at the Python syntax. You could search for Python function declarations, etc., but why don't we just search for Python syntax guide. And we can choose the version that comes from the Python website itself. This is the version 2.7. Let's get the latest one, which is 3.7. And we can have a look in here. So now I know that what I want to declare is a procedure or a function. If I search for procedure, there's nothing there. If we search for function, okay, here we go, function definitions. Let's have a look. So a function definition, okay, the syntaxes are fairly long here. We can have a look down here to see what examples they've got. So here we've got one, def, what's on the telly, penguin equals none, colon, and then the body of the code there. We could follow that here. So it's def followed by the function name, in brackets the parameter list, a colon, and a suite. So we want def function name parameter list colon suite. Def, so function name in this case, test user details, parameter list, colon, and then a suite. Okay, so what is that? We can click that and it tells us. Alright, so that is a statement list followed by a new line. Statement list just being basically a list of statements separated by semicolons and no new lines. Otherwise, we can have a new line. We then have to indent, and we can have one or more statements before we outdent. Okay, what does that mean? Well, a new line followed by an indent. We can then have a number of statements. So if we bring all of these statements up, what that's telling us is they have to be indented within the code. And then I outdent, so I remove that indentation when I get to the end of that. And so down here now, I should be able to call this function that I've created. So in Python, they're called functions. That doesn't distinguish between functions and procedures, which C++ doesn't either, but it's nice to have it conceptually in your mind, these two different ideas, procedures that do things versus functions that calculate things. So here I'm going to test user details. We can run that, and we can see that that's working the same as it was before, but now it's executing it via this function that we've created. And we've learned a little bit of the Python syntax. You create a function using the function definition, and that starts with def, etc. You can see the other terminology coming in here as well. So the function name is an identifier, for example. Alright, so we've got a little bit of that working. We've got that bit working down there. What about creating this read string function? So, well, we know how to create part of the read string. So remember, it was def to create the function name, or to create a function. We put the function name in brackets. We put the parameters. So we can put prompt. We have a colon, and then everything's indented. Inside here, we could have these statements. We don't need semicolons. Remember, it said at the end of each line, you just need a new line. Oh, let's double check return. So if we go back, return, okay, cool, there is a return statement, and it's return followed by an expression list. So we know what an expression is. An expression list allows us to have one or more expressions. Okay, so return result will be perfect. So down here we could now change this to be read string, what is your name? Alright, we're using our read string function. Test that. Cool, that works. Let's add in our read integer function. So in this case, look, really, we can copy and paste most of it over here. Let's now adjust it. So it would be def read integer. We don't need to say the type in Python. The type is determined by the value passed to it. It still has a type, we just can't see it in the code. We don't need semicolons, and that's it. Now, if we wanted to use, instead of the splash kit convert to integer, what we could do is search for Python convert string to integer, how to convert strings to integers. There we go. Int is a standard built-in function to convert strings to integers. Alright, cool. So here, instead of using the splash kit code, we could use the Python code to do that, and we could convert the line that the user entered into an integer by using int line. So now we have the ability to read an integer. We could use that down here just to test out that it's working, just like we have here. Option equals read integer. Oh, I'll put it above. There we go. Option equals read integer. Oh, we got a syntax error. So have a look here. I was just wanting to show you this. Hello world, line 9, invalid syntax at that point. So let's have a look. Oh, remember in our function declarations, we needed a colon before the new line. So we need to put a colon there. There we go, that looks better now. So if I do 3, there we go, that worked. Alright, so as you can see, the difference is not huge. I'm able to pretty much copy the code out of here and paste it into here. Let's add in a couple more features with this loop, or this switch and the loop here. So let's start with the switch. So I want to be able to do something like this. Let's have a look at the Python syntax for that. So if I come back here, go to my Python syntax, and if we search for case or switch, what we do is we find that there isn't actually a case or switch statement in Python, but there is an if statement. So if we have a look at the if statement, I can do if expression suite, we already know what that is, else if expression suite. Okay, so that's an else suite. So we've got the if, else type structure. And so here what we would have to do is say if option equals 1. So we can structure this around the if else kind of structure, because Python doesn't have a switch statement. But we know that is basically just doing this for us in the switch statement anyway. So it's a little bit less convenient, but we should still get the same functionality. So if I choose option 2 now, I get that message. If I choose option 1, I get the testing of my name, which we can see there. And if I do option 4, I get please enter an option from the menu, and it ends. Lastly, let's have a look at a do while loop. Oh, well, look, here we go. Here's the while loop. If we come back here, we can see there's a while, for, try, and with. There's no sort of equivalent of do while, but there is a while. So while expression, suite, and there's an else as well on the while loop, which is an interesting idea. Let's read from the menu, and we'd have to say while option does not equal 2. We put our colon, we indent all of this code, and then at the end we would need to read this back in. Because it's a pre-test loop, we need to initialize the value before we call the loop, and we'll have to initialize it then at the end of the, or reinitialize it at the end of the loop. We save that, compile, well, not compile, run. Now if I do that, you can see it comes back round. I can test name, can do that any number of times, and we can quit. So hopefully that's been a good idea about, a good introduction to how to approach learning a new language. You can use the syntax, because this will tell you exactly what you need to type. And usually they'll provide examples for how to do that alongside the code. You can also just search for, if in Python, and you'll find different tutorials, etc., which will guide you through how to write different statements in each different language. So with the internet, it makes it really easy to access the information you need to learn and pick up a new programming language. Have a go at this in the task for this week.